Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our general meeting. Our moderator today is Dr. Barbara Boardman, who is the Action and Advocacy Co-Chair of the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area. My name is Anu Sahai, and I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Fairfax. Our speaker today is Mr. Scott Konopasek, who is the General Registrar and Director of Elections of Fairfax County. He was appointed by the Fairfax Board of Elections in March of 2021. Scott has more than 25 years of experience in election management in both the public and private sectors. Before coming to Fairfax County, he served as the Assistant Registrar of Voters in the Office of the Clerk Recorder Registrar for Contra Costa County, California, which was more than 700,000 registered voters. Previously, he worked as the Director of Elections for Salt Lake County, Utah, and as Registrar of Voters for the County of San Bernardino, California. He earned a master's degree in political science from the University of Utah, as well as, I'm so sorry, my screen just vanished, as Registrar of Voters for the County of San Bernardino, California. He earned a master's degree in political science from the University of Utah, as well as a bachelor's degree in international relations and French literature from Brigham Young University. He's also a decorated veteran of the United States Army. So welcome to the East Coast, Scott. I know you spent a lot of time on the West Coast. We look forward to listening to you answer our questions, and we have a lot of them. Before I hand it over to Scott, I would like to ask everybody to turn off their videos so that we can hear better. I think we might have some bandwidth issues otherwise. Thank you. Over to you, Scott.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored to speak with you today. I've always enjoyed over the years visiting with the League of Women Voters. We share a common cause and common mission together. And I hope we'll have a fruitful discussion today, and I'll be able to answer your questions. I haven't prepared a fancy PowerPoint with a bunch of images, but I have prepared some kind of a review or summary of the last election. And in going through that and talking about some of the things that are now going on in Fairfax County, I think many of the questions that you guys have posed I may be able to address them. So in any case, a little bit more about me. Thank you very much for that introduction. Last March 2020, in California, we had the presidential preference primary, which coincided with the COVID pandemic kicking off, getting started. And at that point in time, I had already been reviewing my sort of career options going into the future with one new career choice, which is retirement, as I turned 65 in 2020. So with all the drama of presidential elections generally compounded with the drama of the pandemic, after almost 27 years, I decided that I was going to retire after the 2020 election. And I did. I retired the first week of January. But as everyone knows, there was a certain incident on January 6th that made me reconsider that decision and made me decide to apply for the job here in Fairfax County and to continue administering elections in our country. I think it's essential to the health of our democracy that we have well-run elections, and there are many challenges going on right now for us to maintain that here. In any case, let's just review quickly this last November's election. We had an amazing turnout for a gubernatorial election. We had over a 60% turnout. For over 440,000 voters voted. That's 100,000 more voters that voted in 2017. And the turnout in 2017 for the same governor's election was only 47%. So we had a huge increase in turnout, and almost all that turnout increase is due to changes in Virginia's absentee voting laws, allowing people to request the ballot by mail with no excuse required, and allowing voters to show up and vote in person up to 45 days early. In this last election, we had 65,000 people return their voted ballot by mail, and 110,000 people show up and vote early prior to election day, for a total of 175,000, which is 130,000 more than the 52,000 absentee voters that we had in 2017. So the change in the laws regarding absentee voting, I think, have already begun to have an impact here in Virginia. And I think the trend for increased participation is by these alternate means of voting as a percentage of the overall participation is going to continue to grow. And I wouldn't be surprised if after the 2024 presidential election, if more than half of the votes counted were routinely cast early in person or through the mail. That's been the experience of many states as they've adopted the same kind of voting model. Okay. A couple of things that we did differently this time. Let me find my notes here. For the first time, we reported absentee results, or the CAP results, by precinct. We automated the absentee ballot process. We introduced new technology at early voting. We did our election night reporting based upon the return of the electronic media rather than the phone call-in sheets and hand transcription of results. And we streamlined many election day voting and canvassing processes and stuff. So I just want to touch on a couple of those in a little bit of detail. So when I say we automated the vote by mail or the absentee, we realized, based upon 2020, that the volume of people requesting ballots was going to be too large for us to continue to do the hand labeling and hand assembling and hand applying the postage on all the envelopes. So we went out and looked at a number of vendors who provide mailing services for absentees. The first challenge we ran into is that the way that the election code in Virginia has been interpreted, it requires 4 envelopes for every absentee voter. With 4 envelopes, you really can't automate the process. So working with the state, we were able to redesign the envelopes, meeting all the state requirements and with state approval, to go from a 4 envelope format to a 2 envelope format, which really did speed up many things, both on the mail out side and also on the processing side when the ballots returned. Let's see. We mailed 82,000 absentee ballots, 249 ballot styles. Now, the reason that we could report absentee ballots and early votes by precinct was because we printed the ballots by precinct, which creates a logistical issue for early voting and for absentee voting if you don't have automation helping you manage getting the correct ballot to the correct voter. So we have 247 voting precincts in the county. We had 249 ballot styles. So we had to match up the correct ballot for the correct voter. We mailed out initially at the 45 days prior to the election, about 35,000 ballots, and we continued to mail daily until we reached the total number of 82,000 ballots sent out. We also enhanced and improved the ballot tracking capability that voters have to find where their ballot is in the mail process. The state used a product called Ballot Scout in 2020, but Ballot Scout has no longer been able to handle the complexity of Fairfax County. So we found another solution, another vendor who's actually able to provide even better, more accurate and timely data to voters who want to track the status of their ballot. Yeah. Election night reporting. Many of you are probably have served or are serving as election officers and are aware that our process for reporting on election night has historically, for generations, been to call in the results and to have them hand entered into multiple systems here at the county and reported separately to the county's website and to the state. We have continued to do this for years, even though the current voting technology would allow us to do things differently. So we leveraged that new that capability of the voting system. And on election night, we did the call in this time as a backup, but our primary means of getting election results was to have courier teams bring the electronic media from the precincts on election night directly to the government center, where those results were uploaded and reported. We reported our first report was at 7:20 p.m. It consisted of 143,000 early and absentee votes. Those were the first votes reported. That was a major accomplishment on our part to be able to do that. Let's see. So there, we completed reporting, by the way, on the county website at about 9:45. So we were done well before 10 o'clock with 100% reporting, including all of the CAP. Now, there were some reports that Fairfax continued to report late in this election, and those reports are not accurate unless you are only looking at when the state posted our results. So the state, for whatever reason, chose to post our results later than what we provided them to them. So our website, the county's website, is the official place if you want to see timely, early election returns for Fairfax County. And the state site provides an aggregation of the votes for all the localities for the statewide offices. So it is something to keep in mind. The most accurate and timely information is always on the county's website. We used EVs or express vote machines at our satellite locations to manage the logistical challenges of all the 249 ballot styles. We've received a lot of criticism for not doing a major outreach before rolling out that technology. But I want to point out, we've had this technology and it's always been in our early voting sites since 2013. We've just never asked anyone to use it. And we also had enough paper ballots, the traditional hand-marked paper ballots, at our early sites to accommodate all voters. So we didn't really see this as a change or an introduction of new technology, just a new way of offering folks to use the new technology. It was better received than what we could have imagined in our wildest dreams. Over 90% of the people who voted early voted on the express votes. So I anticipate that there may be some questions about that, and I'll be happy to address those later. Another technology that we used for the first time in early voting was the poll pads, the iPads that are used for voter check-in. Many of you know that in the past we used a direct connection to Verus, the state's voter registration system, which is very slow, it's very undependable, has a high failure rate, and a tremendous training burden on our workers. So by using the poll pads, which is the same technology we use on election day, we were able to more quickly process voters with fewer delays and without any outages that we have traditionally experienced. Let's see. A couple other changes. Let's see. So those are basically, that's a good summary of the initiatives or things that we tried to do a little bit differently this time. We expect to continue to experiment and improve and leverage the technology that we have to make elections more secure, accurate, and transparent for all voters. There were now switching from giving a backward-looking view to the election to some of the questions that were submitted. Yeah, I'd like to just take a couple minutes and see if I can pick some of those questions off. And if I don't do it justice, feel free to ask me during the question phase. So the very first, the topic was how have changes in election law changed the way people vote in Virginia. Well, and I spoke briefly about the increase of people voting absentee, leading to a larger turnout overall in the election. But there's a couple of components to that. The very first legislative change that has had an immediate impact and will continue to have an impact going forward is the voters' ability to request a ballot on an ongoing basis. Previously, they had to request a ballot one election at a time. Now voters can submit a request and check the box to say that they would like a ballot mailed to them for every election that they are eligible to vote in. And about 90% of the applications that we've received since July this year have had that permanent checkbox checked on there. So this is actually a good outreach activity for the league. If the league endorses voting by mail and voting early, getting voters to request their ballot, to get it by mail, really takes the pressure off of trying to get people to show up on election day and changes the nature of the get out the vote efforts. So if the league is interested in talking about any type of outreach or campaigns to encourage voting by mail, we are more than happy to visit with you. Drop boxes are a new thing, a new law that was passed in 2020. So we are now required to have drop boxes at every early voting site and at every precinct on election day. And we receive, increasingly, we receive ballots dropped off at those locations. People don't trust the post office. They wait till the last minute. They're afraid that it may not get delivered or postmarked in time. So they've been availing themselves of the drop boxes. I've used drop boxes for many years in many different ways. And I'm a little surprised at how they've been received here in Virginia. A large portion of the population likes them, sees them as being secure and convenient. And another portion of the population sees them as being problematic and a source of potential voter fraud, which is always the basis of the question that I get is how many ballots can a voter drop off at a drop box? And the answer to that question is that there is no limit. Just like there's no limit of how many ballots of someone can take to the post office and put them into the mail stream. And we clarified this many times with the state. And the state's interpretation and the way the law is written is there's no limitation on how many ballots a voter can deposit. However, that does not mean that is ballot harvesting or ballot fraud. So two very, very different things, two different types of motives. And from my experience, there's not a correlation between drop boxes and in any type of mischief with ballots. But I'm happy to take any questions on that. I was asked also what other things would I recommend for Virginia to be looking forward to legislatively. And there's one major item in terms of vote by mail or absentees that I'm a big proponent of, and that is signature verification, rather than having a witness. Presently, the presence of the two signatures, a voter signature and a witness signature, is all it takes to qualify a ballot. The signatures are not compared to anything. They're not verified as identifying, positively identifying the voter as the person who cast that ballot. My experience in Washington State, California, and Utah, and the experience of other states that have longer serving, longer term liberal absentee rules, they all use a signature verification process where a human being compares the signature on the envelope returned by the voter to one of any signatures that we have on file in our voter registration system. So signatures are digitized, and we have images of all the signatures on all the forms that the voters ever signed in their life. And now with online registration, most people are registering through the DMV, and the DMV has captured the signature from the signature pad and provides that to us. So the infrastructure is in place in Virginia to be able to do that. Just some of the tools and procedures and processes would need to be established. But I think that would go a tremendous distance in reassuring people about the integrity and safety, security of voting by mail as a way for voters voting. So let's see. I've got a whole bunch of little notes here relating to, I have just thoughts that came to mind as I was reading your questions, rather than me try to just keep yakking here and meandering. Why don't I hand it back to Barbara, and I'm happy to take any questions anybody has.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Start. And my first thing would be to remind people that if they go to the chat, they can put in questions. So I've been monitoring, and so far I haven't seen any questions, but if you have some, please put them in there. We are checking the chat carefully. I do have a bunch of questions from before.
They came from the registration.
And they came from the registration. So we're going to go through those questions. My first one is, how is the security and integrity of the thumb drive maintained as this information is delivered to the government center?
Okay. The thumb drive is transported to us under the same process as the absentee ballots that are dropped off at the precincts on election day. A chain of custody is established. The memory sticks are put in a serialized container and with a seal on it, is brought back to the county government center by two people riding together in the same vehicle, not caravanning and following each other, but we required them to ride together. They also brought the absentee ballots back. So we just adapted the absentee ballot security and transport requirements that are in statute and guidelines. We translated that over directly over for the electronic media. So we're very confident in the safety and security of the transport.
Okay. Next question. We've been following you on Twitter. And you did a nice discussion about the lovely innovations that we've done that have been really quite cutting edge on tracking what's happening. I specifically wanted to see what sort of threats are going on. What sort of threats have you been getting personally, which is a very distressing thing to hear. How much is the anger that's around elections becoming an attack literally on the process?
Well, I knew that question was going to come up eventually. I was hoping it would be towards the end, and if you
Sorry.
don't mind, maybe would you mind? Because I think one of the other things is you asked me is what do I see going forward in terms of voting rights and
Yeah.
things across the country, and I think the answer to your question is rolled into my response to that larger question. So
Okay.
if you don't mind, let's put that one in the parking lot and come back to it.
Okay. On the issue of signature verification, we have some questions. I, have had the experience that my signature has changed over the years. It changes from, other people. There's changes from day to day. And I literally have had friends who couldn't remember whether they had signed their original thing under their married name or their non-married name. How does that process work to really deal with the fact that, there may be older signatures, there may be, it's something that we haven't particularly supported because we were concerned about that.
Yeah. So I've been doing signature verification for over 25 years. And I've verified millions and millions of signatures. And in fact, last November in California, we verified the signatures on 600,000 vote by mail ballots. And it is not as complicated as one would think. And signatures don't really evolve as much as people think they do. Someone who established their signature as an adult and then later ages, their signature might evolve a little bit, but it's still obviously the signature of the person. The one situation where time and signature evolution happens is with young people. Because many young people register when they're very, very young and before they've really developed their own personal mark or signature. But we have a safety net for that. When we identify signatures that don't appear to match, and it may not be the same person, we have the curing process that we already have when somebody fails to sign. We would just add another cure is if the signature does not appear to match, we would give the voter, would tell the voter and give them the opportunity to cure their signature so their ballot could be counted. So there's a safeguard for voters while safeguarding the security and integrity of the voting process as well. My experience is that 1 or 2% of ballots in the last few years in my last few years in California is only about 2% of ballots were rejected because of a signature mismatch. So it's been done for a long time. It's done very well by a lot of people, and I think it would really bolster everyone's confidence in absentee voting. Certainly mine. As I look at it, knowing that we've verified the signatures.
Follow-up question on that. People are talking about, if you've had a medical condition that has altered your signature, and how do you notify the people who are going to be checking your signature that it's a new signature?
That's a good question. Well, just like if you get a name change or if you move, you update your registration. And that's all a voter would need to do is to send in a new registration application with their new signature on it, and no explanation needed. That signature would be added to the voter's file and would be looked at in a signature comparison mode if the signature on the ballot did not match the one that we previously had. So again, a simple solution.
Okay.
This is from the registration.
From the registration. Another question. This person took several friends to vote and they did curbside voting, which worked well, but it was a struggle for them to read the ballot in the car. They were not physically capable of waiting and standing in line. Is it possible for people who are both physically and visually handicapped to go directly into the poll without having to wait in line?
Okay, well, curbside voting is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful accommodation for those folks that can't actually go in and stand in line and wait like everybody else. But now that we have early voting, we have 45 days that we can help a voter and serve a voter if they need some assistance and accommodation. So someone who knows that they have a challenge or wants to be able to express vote, if you will, while they're doing curbside, you can call and you can schedule a time and a location with us. And we will have people ready to, if we know that you're coming and you have a reservation, so to speak, we can accommodate any voter in the way that's appropriate for that voter. So because curbside voting is an accommodation, different people use it for different reasons. They have different needs, and we're sensitive to all the different reasons and we want to be able to assist voters in every way. But to make a rule to say that curbside voters can crash the line all the time, that's not something that I think would be a good idea.
All right. Okay.
So I see a couple of questions here. Do you in the chat? Do you mind if I just kind of
Go ahead.
pick some of them off?
Yeah.
Okay, so there were some follow-up questions about the curing process. But what we do is as soon as we notice that there's an issue with the voter's ballot that keeps it from qualifying to be counted, we immediately notify the voter via email, if we have an email, and by mail, and we send them the instructions and the documentation they need to complete in order to cure their ballot. So one of the instructions would be, if the signature doesn't match, what to do, which is basically to sign again, provide us a new signature. And the cure rate for no signatures or for missing witness signature in this last election was about 60%. My experience on signature mismatches is over 50% get cured. And there are times when it's not the voter's signature. So we wouldn't expect 100% to always be cured. Let's see.
Okay.
Again.
All right. I have one.
Okay.
Some of our workers have found that the naturalized citizens often do not understand that they can vote. How can the right to vote be better explained to them, and how can that be a better education effort?
That question surprises me a little bit,
Yeah.
because I know that part of the training and requirements that they go through as part of the naturalization process explains their ability to vote and their right to vote. And I've been to many naturalization ceremonies and registered people immediately after they take their citizenship oath. So I'm not sure that that's a trend. There might be some individuals who didn't quite get it, but I think that the immigration process and the groups that work with new immigrants do a good job of informing voters of their rights. So I'm not sure what more we could do other than that, but if someone has some ideas, I'm open to it.
Okay. All right. Next one. How did the Officer of Elections process a ballot request when a voter did not provide ID? So what happened?
Yeah, I think I understand the question. So again, another legislative change on the voter
That's
ID
my-
requirement has allowed a voter to sign an affirmation
Oh, yeah.
saying that they
DMV.
are who they say they are, and they're able to vote a regular ballot without providing ID. And we had about 500 of those this election, I believe is the number. 500 out of 440,000 voters. So let's see.
We know, oops, unmuting. We know the mail-in voting is a secure process, but we often need to respond to people about this who ask questions. What is the best way to reassure people who have doubts about the security of absentee ballots? What can we say when people make comments like, a ballot sent to one person could be completed by another person's, or ballots could go astray during the mail-in process?
Right. So I'm going to come back around to signature verification. When we can verify the signature on the envelope is the same as the voters, we have a 100% confidence that it was that voter who was casting that ballot. And if the name on the envelope and the signature and the voter's record all match, we have confidence that even if the ballot did get redirected somewhere, it was the correct person actually ended up with it and voted it. So we can also explain that dropping off, this is why dropping off more than your own ballot is not a problem and why it's still safe and secure. It's because we are still going to verify in it. If we were verifying signatures, we would still verify that the signature on that envelope is that of the voter. And from that, we know that there's not a problem. All of the concerns that people raise can be set aside with the confidence that it is the voter who actually signed that envelope.
I have another one here. Are there ways to encourage use of the Easy Mark machines for those who struggle with the bubbles on the ballot? That is, those who have stroke, Parkinson's, arthritis, or other motor problems.
Right. Well, that was our major technological push for early voting, was for voters to use those electronic assistive adaptive devices to cast their ballot, to create to mark and print a paper ballot. I believe in accessibility. In the first election I saw when I got here, I saw that the accessible devices were set up in a corner. They were hidden with a handicap sign and nobody knew how to use it. And certainly a blind person would not know it was there to ask to be able to use it. So we've started aggressively in early voting, and we're starting with election day voting as well, of featuring the machine, making sure that it's visible and that workers are trained and knowledgeable in how to use it, and that they offer it to those who may have an interest or may have a need. By offering it to everyone, you don't have to worry about any accusations of discriminating or stereotyping people that may have a disability. So we are on that track right now for emphasizing it more in the precincts, and it was the major feature of early voting this year. So there was a question about which one is cheaper, cheapest
I was
method
going
of
to say,
voting.
that leads into the question about funding for the Office of Elections and where we need to have support and funding for innovations also. So what costs and What's the price of having a free and fair election?
Right. Well, elections are not cheap. Especially when we offer, as we do now, 3 separate voting choices for voters. We're essentially doing 3 elections simultaneously. We're doing the traditional precinct election, hiring volunteers, training them, printing ballots, delivering equipment. But we're also doing the same thing. We're replicating those same tasks and functions at early voting and in voting by mail. So the trend is going to be elections are more and more expensive as we add more and more options. But there's not necessarily anything wrong with that when you stop to think of what a priceless right this is for people to be able to vote, and how priceless and important it is that people have confidence in the outcome of their election. And so in terms of what I see as the funding challenges going forward is we have been in Fairfax County implementing these new expanded early voting and voting by mail, but we haven't been funded for it. So we've just been taking it out of Hyde. So going forward into the next budget cycle, I've already requested ongoing funding for these in the neighborhood of several $million. We'll see what happens with that, but keep an eye on the budget process that the county goes through for next fiscal year, and hopefully you'll see funding specifically for these programs that we're talking about.
I had a question about how do you check if a person is a citizen? And
okay, I get that question all the time. And a lot of people don't necessarily like the answer, but we still have a system based upon trust. We ask voters if they are, we ask them twice, if they are a US citizen, and then they sign under penalty of perjury that yes, indeed, they are. We do verify, we do some ID verification to make sure that people aren't registering dogs and cats, which has happened in certain places over the years. But that's what we're limited to, because there is no list of American citizens anywhere. The State Department doesn't have one, Homeland Security doesn't have one, the state doesn't have one. As Americans, we've chosen not to have a national ID card, a national ID, which would be proof of citizenship that could be provided at any time. And for many good reasons, we're not interested in that. But in order to verify the citizenship at any point in time of any voter, we would have to have some type of intrusive national identification process, which we don't have.
just to follow up, does the social security number do anything to verify that citizenship or not?
No.
Okay.
No, there's a lot of people who aren't citizens have social security numbers legitimately.
Okay. Question on election officers. It's a long day.
Sure is.
And do you have enough full-time volunteers, or is there any plan to go for half sessions?
Yeah, well, there are, and I've been asked this question for more than 20 years. There are many downsides to having split shifts that people don't really realize. Most of them have to do with accountability, security, accuracy of the election process. If the people who open the polls in the morning are not the same people that close the polls at the end of the day, you don't have any confidence of what happened throughout the whole day. So that's one issue. It doubles the amount of training and recruitment that has to be done. We've on an exception basis, we're willing to assign people to work less than a full day, but as a regular practice, it's not good security and it's not very efficient. Although we understand that more people would volunteer if they could only work half a day. So this last election was the first election in many years that we had no part-time or half-day folks, and we're trying to move away from it candidly.
Okay. What? Oh yeah, there keep being more questions, so I don't know how long we should keep you going. We have a bunch of sort of big wrap-up questions for the end, but a question about all the reasons that ballots need to be cured. Which ones were provisional and what percentage of that?
So right now, the reasons for curing an absentee ballot have to do with the voter's affirmation not being completed. Some or all of it not being completed. So that includes the voter needs to print their name, their address, the voter needs to sign it, and there needs to be a signature of a witness. So if any of those things are missing or incomplete, then the voter's ballot goes into that cure process where we try to solicit the information from that voter to be able to qualify their ballot. What was the other?
I don't know, I'm losing track. I'm trying to keep track of the chat. I have another one here about, again, a lot of questions about the issue of going to signatures. Given that a lot of elections are decided by a 0.5% or 1 or 2%, voting rights advocates are trying to sign up younger voters where the signatures are likely to change, as you've mentioned. Should there be education programs to get people to update their signatures? Is that something?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Keep in mind that there are many states that have been doing signature verification for several generations of voters now. So there's a lot of experience out there. It's not a new thing. So the wheel has already been invented. It would just be a matter of adopting it. And yes, voter education is always critical to that. Just like it is when people move, they need to be reminded to update their registration. And the challenge with voter registration nowadays is less with registering new voters, people who have never been registered. The challenge is more getting existing voters to update their registration so they can vote and they can get the material that they need, and they can show up at the right precinct on election day. So updating information, whether it's a signature, a name, an address, is an essential part, and more a critical part of the voter registration processes.
No, I'm unmuted. I understand there was a legal challenge to the decision to allow absentee ballot applications to be fulfilled without social security numbers. Can you update us on the outcome of that challenge? And will that alter how absentee ballot applications will be processed going forward?
Okay, that's I was expecting that question as well. So the absentee application published by the state has a place for voters to provide the last 4 of their social security number, and it says that it's a mandatory field. So that is the reason that because the field has been deemed mandatory by someone, absentee requests have been rejected if the voter did not provide that information. I know a lot of voters are hesitant to provide all or part of their social security number. for identity theft reasons. But we don't need that social security number. It's not used for anything except rejecting applications. We don't use it to determine if the voter is eligible. We don't use it to see if the voter is who they say they are. You know, we look at the name, the voter's name, the voter's address, and then we compare the signatures. And that's how we know that a voter is eligible to request an absentee ballot. Never at any point does anyone look at the social security number to make that determination. So there is a section in the elections code that says the general registrar, me, cannot reject an application for an absentee ballot solely because it's missing the social security number if I can determine the eligibility of the voter. And I can we determine voter eligibility every day. And we know that if we have the name is the same, the address is the same, and the signature is the same, that's all we need to know to verify the identity of the voter. So we were sued for that practice. I wish that the case had been heard on its merits, but it was thrown out due to technicalities and a lack of standing of the people who sued. Had the case been decided on its merits, I'm very confident that our practice would have prevailed.
Stuff is going. Quick one, are you concerned about breach of election data stories in other states? Could that happen in Virginia?
Well, it could happen anywhere. Just ask anybody who's been hacked or anyone who's been hit with a ransomware attack. But the question is what data and when? The voter registration data in and of itself, especially copies of voter registration data that are not used for voting purposes, the risk is pretty low that it's going to affect the outcome of an election. Really, the only thing that could really jeopardize an election would be to hack into election result reporting on the internet. To go in and to change the numbers on the state's website, for example, and then have somebody figure it out later and then correct it, and there's a swing, the winner becomes a loser, or there's a swing in a large number of votes. That's happened here in this county, is my understanding, even with errors in election night reporting that were corrected, but created all kinds of concern for transparency and security and accuracy. So it's only one type of information that I think is vulnerable, that could really undermine the legitimacy of an election, and that is the election results. Voter registration records are also sensitive, but they won't really inhibit people from voting. We have provisional ballots. We have multiple copies and other ways of determining eligibility, to include that infamous paper roster list poll book that people used to sign.
Okay. I think we should get close to wrapping up. There was one set of big general discussion that you left for the end, and then we have a couple of questions also that are friendly.
Okay. So one of your questions was, what's the future? Where's the risk or vulnerability to elections going forward? And we've really, the last 5-6 years, have experienced an unprecedented level of threats to our democratic institutions. And voting and voter confidence is certainly one of those. And many states, you've heard, are passing laws that transfer authority for administering elections and determining outcomes from election professionals to partisans or legislators. That is one of the major challenges and threats I see to the country, to the democratic processes in the country is increasing the partisanship in administering and certifying elections. There are many public servants like me who are nonpartisan, who have taken an oath and take that oath seriously, who are being pushed aside potentially by some of these new laws in favor of allowing less qualified and more partisan people be in these positions of trust. And this is where it circles back to your earlier question. The threats, the unpleasantness, the harassment, the weaponized FOIA requests that are bombarding our office and other offices across the Commonwealth and across the country are really discouraging to election officials, particularly those at the top of the position of the organizations and those with the most experience. Many of my colleagues in the last few weeks and months have said that this is not the job they signed up for, and they're leaving, they're retiring. And I think that whether it's intentional or not, part of the unpleasantness, one of the outcomes of all the unpleasantness, and I'll just leave it kind of general at that, is that people are saying, do I want to do this anymore? And should I leave? Should I turn it over? But then you're worried about who will it be turned over to? How much more partisan is it going to be if I leave? And I ask myself the question all the time, almost every day. I came out of retirement for this. Do I want to continue doing it? How long do I want to continue doing it? But then I say, well, if I don't do it, who is going to do it? And my colleagues across the country are facing that same decision. And I think the worst thing that could happen in the next 3 to 4 years is that the exodus of experienced, seasoned, nonpartisan, professional public servants and their replacement by partisans could be catastrophic to our democracy. 6 months ago, when people asked me about the big lie and what am I doing to convince people that the big lie is not true, I responded even to several league members who really didn't appreciate the response when I said, I don't want to give those claims any oxygen. I don't want to respond or react to it at all. Who's going to believe all that stuff anyway? Well, I was wrong. There are plenty of people who have bought into that, who have been seduced by it. And now it needs to be addressed. People who know that there was no fraud in 2020, regardless who they are, what partisanship they are, what position they hold, people need to start speaking up and saying there wasn't any. Instead of passively watching those who subscribe to those theories do all the things that they're doing. That's kind of I wanted to talk about this at the end because it's kind of serious and maybe a little bit of a downer, and certainly it makes me uneasy to even talk about it. But that's the direction that I'm concerned that our country might be going in. And what role can the league play and individual members of the league? You guys can be the champions who say it didn't happen. What are you talking about? Okay. Wasn't your guy in Congress also elected in that same election? So should his election be thrown out too? There's just so many things that need to be done to stand up to the seduction of the misinformation and lies that are going on.
So I'm not going to say it's a downer, but I'm going to go from that to, we want to finish up on what we can do to increase voter confidence in the system, which you spoke about, but we can go into more detail. And we want to be a good partner with you. And what can we specifically be working on to help your office in future elections, whether it's getting out there and teaching about better registration, getting into the high schools, getting to all the other places, teaching about signatures. But let's think about what we can be doing to make things better as we help you.
Well, I have a great suggestion, actually. So thank you for asking what you can do. We've been developing an SAT campaign, not the SATs to get into college, but security, accuracy, and transparency. Everything we do, all of our processes are geared to ensure one or more of those principles: security, accuracy, and transparency. And you can look at all of our processes, everything we do, the way we do it, and you can tie it back to one of those principles that are being satisfied by those processes. If you could help us explain to people how everything that's being done, that all their questions, all their concerns go back to these three principles: security, accuracy, and transparency, and connect the dots for them and explain to them why verifying a signature is more secure than just having a witness, how it's more transparent, because now you can prove that the signature is that of the voter, and it's more accurate because you know you're counting only those votes that are eligible. So that's just one example, but everything we do can be connected back to one of those principles, and helping people understand that, I think, is the most effective way of combating the misinformation that's out there.
Okay. A positive ending. And thank you very much, Scott. This has been very helpful. And we hope we'll be out there helping again. And I guess we'll finish up with our other co-president, Pat Fahey, who should be available to speak. Pat?
I'm here. Thank you, Barbara. Thanks to Barbara for her action. She's the Action and Advocacy co-chair. She arranged for today's speaker and she moderated this event. Mr. Konopasek, I hope I said that right. Thank you for providing today's informative presentation and answering all our questions. And we are copying the chat box. So, and if it didn't get asked, we would be happy to send them forward. We appreciate your expertise and your dedication to a fair election process. We know that there is no progress without struggle, and we certainly have had a lot of struggle, and we know that when we keep working on it, things will get better. And we look forward to continuing to work with you and your staff at the Office of Elections. And I want to also say thank you to all the league members who attended today, the league members who support our efforts by volunteering and by contributing funds so that we can continue our important work. I want to remind you to consider responding to the giving letter that recently appeared in all of your mailboxes, your US mailboxes. And of course, last of all, there are those relaxed fit t-shirts that you can still purchase via our website. We're all wearing our t-shirts. We want you to wear a t-shirt and declare that democracy is not a spectator sport. We all have to get involved. Thank you again to everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. Bye. And a round of applause. In the schools, we did a round of applause. So a round of applause for our speaker.
And a big thank you for being. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to all.
Thank you, Scott.